been a month since I've seen you guys, apart from the Hanukkah shir, at which I want to thank all of you. I know you were exhausted at the time. If you watch the videos, it was like Sleepy Hollows. But the thing of it is, guys, you put in a lot of effort, and you gave me time when it was important for me to do a yahrzeit for my mom. And I really, really appreciate it. I know it happened quite late that night because of the packing, and there was exhaustion, but I just want to tell you guys how much I appreciate each and every one of you doing it. It seemed to be quite popular. It had 35 views during Hanukkah. People seem to like a share that they can isolate as opposed to follow on for Hanukkah. So it seemed to get quite a lot of watching and to its conclusion. So it wasn't just, what do you call it, spam. So
wouldn't it be nice to know who watched it? If you get the names of those people, it would be imagine who. There must be other, can't just be people in South Africa.
No, so most of them are people in South Africa. Maybe that some obviously wanted to watch the link because they knew my mother. I think some others sent it to friends of mine, or not friends of mine. I sent it to one or two friends, and they might have sent it to other people because the Hanukkah shir was decent. It was based on Rabbi Zev Leff. It wasn't based on me, believe me. I didn't come up with that. I might be able to remember, but I'm certainly not of that caliber. So just so the right person gets credit. Anyway, guys, it was good to see you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you my screen of the Mishnah so that we can just orientate ourselves a little bit about where we left off. And since Gavin is the only one that isn't feeling the holiness of the moment of being in Eretz Yisrael, we'll give him the holiness of reading the Mishnah. He deserves that.
Thanks for rubbing it in. If one steals pieces...
Mate, I'm not rubbing it in. I wish we could
but Gavin's a Kohen as well. Kohen gets preference with Aliyot and other things.
To read the Mishnah is a big honor. We honor you.
Really? No, I appreciate it. I'm not taking away. I take whatever I can get and more. If one steals pieces, yeah, absolutely. I'm human.
Speaking of taking all that one can get, read the Mishnah on theft.
100%. All right, chapter 9. If one steals pieces of wood and makes them into utensils, or pieces of wool and makes them into garments, he pays their value as at the time of the robbery. If one stole a pregnant cow and it gave birth, or a wool-laden ewe and he sheared it, he pays the value of the cow that stands to give birth, or the value of a ewe that stands to be shorn. If one stole a cow and it became pregnant while it was being held by him, and it gave birth, or a ewe and it became laden with wool while it was being held by him, and he sheared it, he pays the value as at the time of the robbery. This is the rule. All robbers pay the value as at the time of the robbery.
Excellent. Well read. Now, I personally couldn't have read it as well, and I'm very happy you did it. So I'll tell you what part we're focusing on at the moment. We already discussed how changes affect acquisition, and that was the first part of the Mishnah. Then we also touched in the 94th daf the issue about if one stole a pregnant cow and it gave birth, or a wool-laden ewe and he sheared it, he pays the value of the cow that stands to give birth, the value of the ewe that stands to be shorn. So we dealt with that a bit in terms of Rashi's opinion in the Rosh, and now we're going to see the opinion according to some great Tanaim, which is Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Shimon. But I just need to give you a bit of a refresh on Rashi and the Rosh, because they have two objective opinions. And I think when you read these opinions of the Tanaim, you'll see where they come into play. And I'm going here and just giving you a little bit of an understanding. So if you have a look here, is what does it mean that if you steal a pregnant cow and it gave birth, or a wool-laden ewe and you sheared it, you pay the value of the cow that stands to give birth, or the value of the ewe that stands to be shorn. So what we have to do is encapsulate what time period this happened in. And what we are saying is there's a difference between the previous and present value of the calf and the fleece belonging to the robber, because he acquired it through the physical change. Now, what you've got to know is that according to Rashi, it's apparent that the robber acquires only the born calf or the shorn wool. not the cow, the ewe itself. So basically, when our Mishnah states that he pays the value of a cow ready to give birth or the value of an ewe ready to be shorn, it doesn't mean that he pays the whole amount in cash. Because you must remember, most of the time, robbers, you're trying to extract money. Sometimes they don't have the money, they've got the goods. So the thing of it is, what we say is, the thief returns the animal in its present state. Why? Because it's still in existence. And according to Rashi, that animal didn't change. Because again, okay, the animal might have been a little bit fatter, or there might have been a issue of the wool. But those are externalities on the animal. They don't affect the animal. It's not a change within the animal itself dramatically, whereas the Rosh feels it is. So according to Rashi, for example, you've got a normal cow that's worth 100 zuz. When it's pregnant, depending on the stage of pregnancy, it can fluctuate about half a zuz. It can fluctuate between non-pregnancy and giving birth to 50 zuz. Why? Because a cow's worth 100 zuz, let's say the calf is worth 50 zuz. But generally, a pregnant cow has got a chance of miscarrying. And therefore, we don't say that a pregnant cow is generally worth more than 130 zuz. But if it's an early term of pregnancy, what we would say in that particular case is that it might only be worth 115 zuz or 120. The bottom line is, since an unpregnant cow is worth 100 zuz, what you do is the thief would return the cow and pay the balance according to the stage of pregnancy. So if the pregnancy stage was close to the finish line of birth, there would be another 25 zuz in the pot, for example, to give in cash. But he doesn't have to come up with 120 zuz. He merely returns the animal in a non-pregnant state, at which it's worth 100, and pays the difference between the non-pregnant state and the pregnancy stage of 25 zuz. And only the 25 zuz is cash, and the rest is made good on returning the animal. But, and this is where the Rosh is, this is where Rosh is quite specific. The calf that has successfully come from a fetus, that belongs to the robber. Why? Because that changed. The cow didn't change really. What happened is a fetus became a calf. Now that's a real change. So therefore that change affects acquisition for the robber. And the robber keeps the 50 zuz. So what has the robber profited? 25 zuz. Because he's paid 25 zuz in cash for the pregnancy, and the balance of the fetal worth compared to the calf is 25 zuz. The robber has benefited, but the original owner is not out of pocket in any way. Now, the Rosh feels that it's somewhat different, okay? Even in fact, according to the ewe, because I mean, Rashi is saying that the ewe itself, look, it's like I go back to the 70s, 1970s, and I've got that Jan van Riebeck look. Only South Africans would understand that, with the moustache and the long hair and that hippie hair sort of thing. Jan van Riebeck is not that different to a hippie look, by the way, except for the Quaker oat clothing. But never mind that. But the thing of it is, that's long hair. Now, say somebody could have a shaitel, Gavin, this would appeal to you in the shaitel business, and that person was worth on the slave market 100 zuz, and his shaitel worth was worth another 20 zuz. Then what we're saying is the hair is independent of him. If he shaves it, he's still worth 100 zuz. He hasn't changed. His hair has changed. And that's a separate entity according to Rashi. So what would happen then is the ewe is returned, and the difference that the robber would pay is only the value in cash of what the hair growth was or the wool growth was up until the time that it was stolen. If when he stole the animal, the hair suddenly went from a moderate look to a 1970s hippie look, and the animal became a lot more woolly, then what happens is the robber gets to keep that profit difference as long as he recompensates the original owner for what the wool was worth at the time of the theft, as well as return the animal itself. So what the wood is worth at the time of theft is paid in cash because it no longer resembles it because the hair grew. But that ewe he returns as is because the ewe never changed, its hair growth did. Now the Rosh doesn't feel that way. The Rosh feels that, not say feels, thinks. I mean, we're not woke people here. Feels. What's feelings? The facts don't care about your feelings, as Ben Shapiro says. Sorry, I'm in a weird mood. So anyway, the bottom line of it, as far as the Rosh is concerned, is that the animal itself has changed quite dramatically. And therefore, what happens is he gets to keep the cow, the calf, and he gives the full 125 zuz in cash instead of returning the cow and giving 25 zuz in cash. Okay, that's one thing you've got to bear in mind. And then the ewe laden with wool, he keeps the ewe with the hair growth, the added hair growth since the time of the robbery, and he gives the amount of cash of whatever that hair growth was and the animal in terms of the robbery, because the Rosh only disagrees with Rashi in terms of saying that such a change did have a physical acquisition base because it was a physical enough change where the robber acquired the animal. Whereas Rashi is saying these factors are external to the animal. A fetus becomes a calf, short hair growth becomes long, but it's independent of the person or the animal, etc., etc. So that's the distinct difference between the two of them. Before we proceed to Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, does that make sense? I've kept it as simple as possible. Nothing complicated. Guys, make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. Now, I hope you don't mind if we did that in revision, but I figured we don't. You might remember it a month later, but even I was a bit punchy, so I thought I wanted to review it a bit. So, we just learned the Mishnah: if one stole a pregnant cow and it gave birth, etc., or wool-laden ewe and he sheared it, he pays the value of the cow ready to give birth, or the value of the ewe ready to be shorn. That's what the Mishnah says. Now, there's a brisa that's relevant to the Gemara, which states almost the same thing. It says, if one steals an ewe and he sheared it, or a cow and it gave birth, he returns it, meaning the animal itself, its shearings and its offspring. Obviously, it's shearings if it's an ewe, and its offspring if it's a cow in this particular regard. These are the words of Rabbi Meir. So, as far as Rabbi Meir is concerned, he returns the stolen animal and everything that he took from it, including that which appreciated while in his possession. Pretty clear, guys, how Rashi brings it forward? Nothing complicated there. So that's Rabbi Meir. Now, Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is a little bit different. Why? Because up until now, we've learned Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, actually, and this is the first time we're learning Rabbi Meir. So how does Rabbi Meir differ? Because you'll see that both Rashi and the Rosh seem to hold like Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir is saying, I don't care what appreciation has developed. The thief needs to return the animal and everything that appreciated to the original owner. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says something different. He says the stolen animal returns to the original owner as it is. Okay? And what does that mean? The animal stolen is returned to the original owner in its present non-pregnant state, or its present shorn state if it's an ewe. And additionally, the robber pays the owner the value of the wool or the fetus at the time of the robbery, and that's in cash. For we all agree that whenever a robber doesn't return the stolen article itself, he must pay whatever its full value was at the time of the robbery. But the robber does not, however, pay the value of the subsequent appreciation that occurred while the animal was in his possession. You get what I'm saying? So the only difference between the Rosh and Rashi is they both agree with Rabbi Yehuda. The one is just saying, the Rosh is saying that the physical change is enough to render the fact that the animal is kept, but you give the cash equivalent at the timeline of the robbery. And Rashi is saying it's not significant enough change in the animal. The only thing that's changed is the hair growth, or from a fetus to a calf. So you return the animal, and that which is changed is acquired by the robber, and the difference you pay in cash. So both of them agree with Rabbi Yehuda that the appreciation value of the profit made from fetus to calf or medium-sized hair growth or wool growth to full-length wool growth is profited by the robber. But the original owner gets compensated for what he lost during the time of the robbery. Is that clear, guys? It's pretty straightforward. After you sleeping, you awake?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So now we've got now what we're going to do is in Rabban Shimler Amar, Rabbi Shimon says, we view it as if it was an article appraised and placed with him according to its cash value at the time of the robbery. Now, so far, it sounds like Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda are the same. Because it seems as though they're both saying the same thing. Listen, let's look at the timeline at the time of the robbery. We appraise the value, and it's given according to cash. So at that point, so it seems as though they're very similar, Rabbi Shimon and Rav Yehuda. Rabbi Meir is completely different, much more stringent on the thief. So firstly, there will be differences, but what you've got to bear in mind now is what is this issue with appraisal? So it basically refers that there's an appraisal made, and an appraisal is actually an arrangement, even against somebody's will, because the thief doesn't want to give back any of his money. It's an arrangement by which an article is appraised and then transferred to the possession of someone else. And that person owns the article and becomes obligated to restore that appraised value to the original owner at some future date. It doesn't matter whether the actual article either depreciates or appreciates, regardless, in the interim. It doesn't matter. So let's just think of a common case that we learned. We learned, guys, there's a which is an iron sheep asset. So what was that? A woman brings into a marriage as her share. And what happens is they assess it at that current market value, and it becomes the property of the husband. Now, should he divorce her, or should he predecease her, in which case the estate will pay it, it must pay her that appraised value at the exact timeline at what the property was assessed, or when the property was assessed. Doesn't matter whether depreciated in value or appreciated in value. And let me give you two examples. Even if I'm in Israel, I still think of South African examples. In the old days, when we grew up in the 70s, my parents lived in Yeovil. Now, Yeovil and Berea were popular Jewish areas, and the property prices were good. Even if you look at the old days in Orange Grove, there were a lot of Greek and Italian families there. There were a lot of Jewish families in Orange Grove, and it had a good, respectable rate like Sydenham. Then part of Orange Grove became affirmative action, BE, and it started creeping and looking like a township. And there's some areas in Orange Grove that even I remember in 2006, my dad sold his house, and he had a house in Orange Grove because it was just getting too dodgy. It was like a township. Certainly, even by the time the 80s and 90s came around, Yeovil became not a great place to live. By the time post the election 10 years, I've got a video of what happened this year in Hillbrow on New Year's Day. Yeah, it looks like a war zone. But despite that, what we're talking about here is the depreciation of what Yeovil was worth then in its heyday with the Jewish community and what it's worth now. So if she had a property that was worth at that stage a certain amount, even if the area's gone down, the husband, if he divorces her, has to pay that amount. Now, before you panic and think, why should he pay the price of Glen Hazel for a place in Yeovil? You must remember that in the South African condition, there's another factor that comes into play. After you're falling asleep. And I've actually worked quite hard at this, mate.
I'm not asleep. It's the angle of the lens. I can try to use that to make you feel better, but it's holding it up my
As
head.
long as you're awake, it's fine, mate. You don't have to have your eyes open. My ego was suppressed years ago.
I mean, I'm listening to everything. I know what you
That's
said. I
fine.
understand about
That's
taking over and whatsoever. Another thing I have to tell you about that is I had a friend of mine that sold a building at such a cheap rate in Maria. It was ridiculous. Can you imagine? It was like 20 apartments for like 350,000 rand. It was nothing.
It was nothing,
And
but
when
the one thing that you've got to bear in mind, and this is the fact I'm going to bring now, is before you think it's unfair, the one factor that we've got today that works for us, that didn't work for them then, is we've got the inflationary index. So when an area depreciates and you paid an arm and a leg, but money is not worth what it's worth, you might have only paid 350,000 rand for it in real terms then. And now, if you bought that property in Glen Hazel, it would be 35 million rand, for example. So the value price goes down of the property, but the inflation means your money is worth less. So the inflation means it's a problem that even if the area improves, you still lose out on the inflation. And it's a double whammy. You lose out both in terms of depreciation, both in inflation and the depreciation of property. So what I'm asking you to do for this example, guys, is to please take out of the equation what we say the inflationary index. Because what we learned, I remember watching on the History Channel that for 400 years during the Middle Ages, it wasn't a thing of inflation because economies were not based on Wall Street. And they weren't sensitive to external tremors to the extent that they are now in capital markets and fuel and all sorts of other things. What happened was you grew a potato 50 years ago. You grow a potato now. It's still a potato. It still feeds you. There's no inflation. It's only in broader, complex economies that there's inflation in currency exchanges. So when you take inflation out of the equation, it's not a lose-lose factor. Can you see what I'm saying, guys? That's the bottom line. Take it out. So all I'm saying is, if she had a Yeovil setup when it's heyday, and it became nothing, the wife gains because she didn't lose money on the depreciation. If it appreciated, let's use another example of appreciation. When I was young, if you looked at Midrand and Fourways, you went horse riding there in the 70s. It was felt. It's now got multi-million rand property in Bryanston and Fourways, etc., and it's appreciated in value. So what would happen is if she bought property in Fourways in that point, and her husband divorced her, he'd only have to pay her for the Bryanston property if he divorced her, and could keep the property at what it was worth back in the day, what she paid for it. So there's no loss to her. It's not unfair to her or unfair to the husband. It's just the case of her being reimbursed with a value. So she doesn't lose on depreciation. She doesn't gain on appreciation. And that is what Rabbi Shimon is saying in this particular case. And we're going to see how, although that sounds very similar to Rabbi Yehuda, is a specific change as far as that's concerned. Okay? So Rabbi Shimon says we view it as if it was an article appraised and placed with him according to its cash value at the time of the robbery. Now, we can go forward 10 minutes and do more, but I think at this point, I don't want to hit another issue and be halfway through, because tomorrow I'll just be almost repeating myself completely. But we're going to discuss in next session Rabbi Meir's opinion. And I'd like to ask you, Arthur, what was Rabbi Meir's
opinion? We can't hear you at all, eh?
Can you hear me now?
Now we can. You went off there for a bit.
All right, so guys, I want to ask you, tomorrow we're going to analyze Rabbi Meir's opinion. There's Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. I can give it to you in 3 sentences. Would you give it to me in 3 sentences? What does Rabbi Meir hold? Guys?
You were like semi-frozen and you're...
Guys? Guys, can you see me now? Guys?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Yeah. And see you.
Okay, there's three opinions. There's Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Shimon. What do each of them hold? Give it to me in 3 sentences. One person, go for it. What does Rabbi Shimon hold, guys?
Well, all three of them basically hold that you have.
No. Okay, I want to know specifically what Rabbi Meir holds. I don't need any of you to tell me. I want to know what you guys are going to hold.
Okay, if somebody remembers the names better than me.
You know what? I want to jack up your game because you guys are bright. So you can remember 3 opinions. They're just one-liners. One-liners.
Rabbi Meir, I think, said that they have to give cash back. That they have to give the animal back. You have to give the animal back, and you have to pay the difference. He was the strictest.
Okay, I'll give you 80%. They're not bad. So what he said is he said, listen, I don't care what came out of it, whether there was a calf from a fetus or full wool from partial wool. The thief returns everything. The thief doesn't profit from this robbery in any way, shape, or form. Everything is returned. That's the bottom 1 sentence line of Rabbi Meir. Rashi and the Rosh have got an argument in terms of what constitutes physical change and what is kept by the rabbi or not, but the rabbi or not. But that's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, and that they both concur with. But Rabbi Meir says there shall be no profiting from this transaction. You got a calf that came from a robbery and the cow, return them both. You got a dead fetus, you return it. Whatever you got, you return it. You return you return the wool. You ain't profiting at all. Whatever you got, return, and whatever you damage, give the balance in cash, whatever. But you will return it so that the original owner, once they kept the original owner, gains the appreciation, not the robber. That's all I wanted to say. Kevin, what's your question?
You say, okay, just one thing. You said you will return it, we will return it, or you will return it.
Well, I'm not assuming we are thieves, but
but you said earlier, just correct me. So if this guy sells the ewe and shears the wool,
I'm going
but
to
then only gives it back.
You and we now.
Wool and wool. You said wool. Okay, so he keeps he shears the wool, but then lets the wool grow back to the state it was when he stole it. Can he can keep that wool? Because he's giving it back to because he's benefiting.
According to Rabbi
benefiting.
Yes, according to Rabbi Meir, the robber is not entitled to benefit at all from his transaction. He will give everything that occurred from the robbery back. All its byproducts, all the profit, all the appreciation goes back to the original owner. Nothing under discussion, according to Rabbi Meir.
So the robber can't pull the wool over the owner's eyes.
Exactly.
But he can pay for it then if he wants, I suppose.
So yes, but he's still paying everything for it. And the point
can't get it for nothing.
Yeah. Okay, so the point of it is the whole dispute does change effect and acquisition. How much do you pay in cash? Do you return the original owner? But that only comes with Rabbi Yehuda, because according to Rabbi Meir, there is no acquisition by the robber. That's the point. The robber never acquires any of it. That's the point. The argument with the Rashi and the Rosh only occur with Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, so Rabbi Yehuda is saying, look, as far as the physical change that takes place, what happens is, I think the easiest way to put Rabbi Yehuda is as follows: the stolen animal returns to the original owner as is, exactly as it is. So meaning that the timeline is at the time of the robbery. And whatever the pregnant state of the animal was worth, the original animal is returned, and the difference between the non-pregnant state and that stage of pregnancy is paid. But acquisition or the profit by the robber in terms of the difference between the fetal stage and the calf is kept by the robber, or the slightly less grown wool at the time of the robbery compared to the full grown wool, and the robber pays the difference when he returns the ewe. That's according to Rashi's explanation of Rabbi Yehuda. According to the Rosh, the physical change took place in the animal, not just the fetus and the wool. And therefore, guys, can you see me?
Yeah.
And therefore, either way, in other words, the value at the time of the robbery, whether it's cash or the actual animal back, is returned as is. And any sort of extra accrued amount, for example, the wool at the timeline of the robbery or the fetus at the timeline of the robbery, you can't pay it by returning the calf because the calf is worth more. So you only have to pay the cash difference. According to the Rosh's explanation of Rabbi Yehuda, is that the thief keeps all of it and gives the cash at the timeline of the robbery. According to Rashi, the actual animals are returned and he pays the difference of the partially grown hair or the fetal stage, and the robber keeps the, what do you call it, the profit or appreciation. But both go according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. And Rabbi Shimon said, listen, it works differently. It works slightly on the time of the appraisal at the time of the robbery. So far, that sounds exactly like Rabbi Yehuda. But factors of depreciation and appreciation don't come into play. That's the major difference with Rabbi Shimon. Okay. Now we've got 2 minutes until Rav Simcha Steinhell share. Guys, I wish you a good evening. Lovely to see you.
Shkach.
Thanks.
Likewise.
And we will chat tomorrow, eh?
Sure.